Okay, Venus?
Okay, Steve.
Right. Let's go.
They were the shows that launched a generation of childhoods. A rocket-powered blend of action, adventure and explosions. Worlds where cars could fly, horses could talk, and where it was better to avoid anything marked atomic engine.
I saw myself that I was going to be something like a Steven Spielberg of that time. And here I was being asked to make puppet films, but we needed the money, so we took it on.
This is the story of two worlds, a world full of danger and peril, and a world set against the prosaic backdrop of the Slough trading estate, where technicians and filmmakers would launch themselves into a universe in which anything could happen in the next half hour. AP Films was formed in 1957 by 29-year-old Gerry Anderson and his friend and colleague Arthur Provis.
I decided that I would get together with some friends and form our own production company.
I set up AP Films with Gerry because we had a promise to make 52 episodes of Twizzle.
Along came a woman by the name of Roberta Lee, and under her arm she had 52 15-minute scripts. And she said, "Would you like to shoot this series?" And we said, yes. I mean, we didn't even stop to think. And then she said, yes, they're children's shows and they've got to be made using puppets, at which point I nearly vomited on the floor.
To begin with, the scripts were impossible. We had to rewrite them because of the limits of puppets. I mean, they can't do anything. And if anybody tells you that they can walk, forget it, they can't.
In mid-1957, armed with their first commission, AP Films took their first offices in Maidenhead, at an imposing mansion called Islet Park.
Islet Park was in Maidenhead, and it was just by the river.
It was a bit like sometime in the 1920s or the 1930s, there'd been a wild party at the place, and everybody died, and nobody bothered to pick up their cars or anything. And it had just, a bit like Miss Havisham's wedding feast, it was left.
I contacted a puppeteer, and she came along with this papier-mâché puppet, very rough face, eyes were painted on, mouth was painted on, didn't open, and it had thick carpet thread to control the puppets. And she said, okay, well, here's what you do. You get a sheet of hardboard, I stand behind it, and on the hardboard you paint a little scene like a garden, say, a few props, you know, fork, spade, couple of flower pots, and I lean over the top and I perform with the puppet and you film it. Well, of course, I mean, I couldn't see how we could make a television series like that. I came up with the idea of putting the puppeteers overhead.
Puppeteers work from what's called a bridge. It was made of Dexion. Puppets were worked from this bridge, and there were little stages with the scenery on, 2 feet from the actual ground.
Roberta Lee asked us to make another series that she had created. This time it was Torchy the Battery Boy.
Hello, Moon Man.
Don't hello me. Get out of my bed and let me climb in.
You can't go to sleep during the day.
I was thinking all the time, if I make really good puppet films, the broadcasters or the financiers are going to say, listen, this guy's wasting his time. Let's give him a live action show. So guess what happened? They said, hey, this guy makes great puppet films, let's give him some more.
Four Feather Falls.
In Four Feather Falls, Four Feather Falls, there's always magic in the air.
Welcome to Four Feather Falls, the friendly western town that's full of fun and excitement. And here's the sheriff, Tex Tucker.
Howdy, folks.
I'd like you to meet my horse, Sir Rocky, here.
Awfully pleased to meet you.
He's a thoroughbred, you see. And my other pal, Dusty.
Hiya, folks! Yes, they can talk. Thanks to these magic feathers.
When we finished with Roberta Lee, we made our very first independent production. We had made not a lot of money, but enough to make a pilot film.
Barry Gray, the composer, had this idea for a cowboy series and told Gerry about it, and they decided that they would like to make it. They shot the pilot for Feather Falls at Islet Park, and then that, of course, was sold to Granada. And when Granada decided to buy it, that's when, you know, we realised that it would be better to move to a bigger studio.
In the summer of 1959, AP Films packed up and left their home at Islet Park to relocate to the less glamorous surroundings of the Slough trading estate.
We hired a number of stars of that time. One was Michael Holliday, who was a singer and a sort of Bing Crosby sound-alike. The sheriff's voice was played by, wait for it folks, Nicholas Parsons, and the dog and the horse were played by Kenneth Connor. Whenever we finished the show, we had a black and white combined print which we put in a 200-foot film can, put the top on, taped it up and posted it to Granada. And then back would come, about a week later, a payment for it. There was never any comment on the productions. And we made all those episodes, and not once did we hear from Granada whether they were happy or not happy. And when we sent the last episode through, I expected to receive a letter which would say, "Jolly good chaps, you know, everybody's very pleased, thank you. And next we would like you to make..." I never heard from Granada again until many, many years later.
Lou Grade was one of television's first moguls. In the late 1950s, he bought what was to become a successful ITV franchise. On the verge of bankruptcy, Gerry arranged a meeting with Lou.
We were going to go into voluntary liquidation. And a friend of ours called Frank Green came in, and we told him that we were going bust. And he said, "I mean, you can't do this, Gerry. I mean, look, you know, you've got a control room here. You actually built it with your own hands, and you've got your overhead bridges for the puppets, and you've got a projector and BP and all this sort of thing." And he said, "I can't bear the thought of you closing down." He said, "I've got a friend called Connery Chappell, and he knows Lou Grade."
And Gerry went to see Lou Grade and said, "We want to do this series about a machine called Supercar." And Lou Grade said, "Oh yes, how much will it cost?" Understandably.
So I said to him, "We've budgeted out and it'll cost £3,000 an episode." And he exploded. I mean, frightened the life out of me. He said, £3,000 an episode? I can't afford to pay you that. This is for a kids series. What are you talking about? So he said, he looked at me and he could see that he'd, shaken me, and I was really quite frightened. And so he became very nice, and he's Uncle Lou now. And he said, "Look, Gerry, if you go back to your studio, he said, 5 o'clock now, if you come and see me tomorrow morning at 7:30 and tell me that you cut the budget in half, I'll give you an immediate contract for 26 pictures."
Well, Gerry sat down with his calculator, I suppose, and his pencil and paper, and came up with a figure which was only a third less than he'd offered to Lou Grade. Instead of a half, you could only reduce it by a third.
I could actually feel my eyes welling with tears. And I said, "Mr. Grade, I've been up all night and we've tried desperately." I said, "We've cut a third off the budget, but there's no way we could cut it in half."
So Lou Grade sort of got up from his chair and went up to a door and said, "Just a minute," and went through into what Gerry took to be another room, and came back a few seconds later and said, "Okay, you got yourself a series." And
he just said, "Okay, you got a series." Just like that.
It transpired later that Gerry, in fact, discovered that what the room that Lou Grade went into was not another office, an accountant's office or something. It was in fact a cupboard.
I turned back and said, "Mr. Grade, is it possible for you to let me have a letter of intent?" And then again he exploded. He said, a letter of intent? My word is better than any contract or agreement you could ever get drawn up. Now get out of here and make the series.
And with Supercar came a new trademark, filmed in Supermarionation.
Supercar, Supercar, with beauty and grace, as swift as can be. Watch it flying through the air. It travels in space or under the sea, and it can journey anywhere.
In November 1960, Gerry Anderson and Sylvia Tam tied the knot. Their stormy marriage would become one of the most publicised show business partnerships of the 1960s.
They seemed to be a very nice partnership, and they seemed to work together very well. And it was just sad that later on it fell apart.
We in fact had been living together for quite some time. And now and again she would say, well, aren't we going to get married? And I would say, yes, of course, but we can't do it at the moment. We were too busy. And eventually we found the time and we went up to town, got married. I was driving back to the studio and it was quite late, and on the grass in front of this little studio I saw the round water tank where the fire service had filled with water. They had Supercar on a line and somebody was holding their breath, holding it underwater. They would release it and pull it out the water, and it wasn't working. So I said to my then wife, sorry, I'll be late. This is our marriage night. So I spent the night working outside, getting that particular shot.
It was a very happy time, and I always remember the image of Gerry and Sylvia walking around arm in arm, and just enjoying it. I can always remember that, which makes up for all the, the unpleasantness.
Fireball XL5 was a space rocket which carried a crew, Steve, Zodiac, Venus, and they would fly to different planets in the universe and meet with aliens, friendly or otherwise. And basically that was the story of the series. The interesting thing was that I had heard, and I don't know whether this is correct or not, I had heard that the Russians were experimenting with launching their rockets instead of vertically and rising vertically, that they would go along, gain speed along a railway track, and then, rather like an aircraft, lift its nose and fly. Now the only thing is, of course, it had to have wheels, and the wheels would have been an impediment in terms of airflow and so on. So as soon as it took off, they would jettison the undercarriage. And one of the things that a few kids would ask me is, what happens to all the undercarriages that they drop in that field at the end of the runway?
Fireball XL5 built on the success of Supercar. The puppets were refined and developed continually.
I mean, this is a fairly traditional body structure for any kind of string puppet used in live performance.
You made the clay first, and then took a rubber mould, and then took...
Well, you had to have a plaster outer casing to hold the rubber into it. Yeah.
And then the fiberglass was put into that, a gel coat, just like you make a boat. And then the rubber was, the plaster was taken off, and then the rubber was peeled back, and you're left with this and a bit of tidying up and some paint.
I definitely think he was modelled on Lou Grade.
This is interesting because it's got a separate neck as well. The later figures didn't. They had a solid neck, but that was important because it needed space for the solenoid in the base of the neck, so more room was needed, so the head was made in one.
From what we called the control box, which was right at the end of the studio, there was a tape playback machine, and the dialogue went through the wires, down the puppet wires into the puppet's head, and inside the puppet's head was a solenoid, little sort of electromagnet which moved the mouth open and close.
9,000,
11,000. It was either too much sensitivity, as you used to call it, so it used to say, hello, how are you today, into the mouth. Or else it was the other way, and it used to go, hello, how are you today?
Everybody's got to be ready. And so everybody, after all this time we've been waiting, rehearsing, lighting, getting the right lens, doing all these things, everything's ready. And so, you say, okay, turn over, action.
Puppets inevitably, during the course of operating, used to get tied up in knots, and arms went backwards and hands that were flipped backwards. And to start with, you used to have to ask the camera technicians to sort it out, and they were sort of a bit like asking Godzilla to do some brain surgery. They sort of, oh, it seems to have come off,
I received a call at the studio from Lou one morning, and he said, Gerry, can you come up and see me? And I said, yes, sure, tomorrow morning. He said, well, can you come up now? So I said, yeah, fine. So I jumped in my car, drove up to ATV House, and I got into Lou's office, and he sat me down in front of his desk, and he looked me straight in the eye and he said, Gerry, I've decided to buy your company. Now, I have to tell you, I was deeply offended because we had our own company and we had our own letterhead with our names printed on it, and we had a telephone and a filing cabinet, and here he was, he wanted to buy our company, and I thought to myself, what a bloody cheek this bloke's got. I mean, he didn't say, I'd like to buy your company. No, he said, I'm going to buy your company. Not, would you like to sell your company? No, I've decided to buy your company. And I sat there thinking, what a damn cheek he's got. And then he told me how much he was prepared to pay. And I remember thinking, what a good idea that he should buy my company.
Stand by for action.
Stingray became the first television series in the UK filmed entirely in colour. Lou significantly increased his investment in AP Films, ensuring that Stingray would be one of the most groundbreaking television series ever made.
We built aquariums which were that wide, okay, and they were probably 3 feet high and probably 8 feet long.
We put the camera at one side and the action at the other side. So you were shooting or filming through this tank.
And often with people with sticks.
Oh, yes.
Directing the fish to
go.
Oh,
yes, indeed. Yes, you had to have people with a stick sort of cheating so that the fish would swim away from it to get them into shot at the right time. Yes, we gave our fish some stick, I suppose you could say.
Commander Shore, Lieutenant, Atlanta, meet Marina, the latest recruit to the World Aquanaut Security Patrol.
Marina, well, what do you know?
At the time, if you put all the sails together over the whole world and added up the figure, America would pay a much larger figure for America than the whole world put together. So the American market was very, very important, and it was very important to me because our shows were very expensive, and I was a perfectionist, and therefore they became more and more expensive.
In an entirely artificial world, it took the human touch to bring the characters to life. Every Sunday, a team of actors would assemble to lend their voices to the miniature stars.
Surface Agent X20 reporting. The underwater radar system informs me that the World Aquanaut Security Patrol vessel Stingray has just passed the island, heading in the direction of explosion zone.
In 1961, I had done, which I think was about my 35th film called Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea with the wonderful Peter Lorre. And I was fascinated with voices. I was listening to them all the time. And one time they went to roll a take, and Peter Lorre had gone to the men's room, and the AD didn't notice. So we were doing the take without him. Walter Pidgeon did his line, and everybody, you know, did their line. And came time for his line, he wasn't there. So I flipped it in. Oh, well, see, the Van Allen belt that hangs up there in the troposphere at that altitude. And so Peter Lorre came back, and I said, okay, Mr. Lorre, we won't need you for the rest of the day. He said, no, I have a whole lot of important scenes to do today, a lot of big scenes. They said, no. Mr. Easton will do your voice. He said, you do my voice? And I was kind of embarrassed. He said, do that for me. So I did it, and he said, that's very good. He said, a lot of people, when they go to do my voice, they put the finger on their nose. So I don't walk around with my finger on my nose. So when I met the Andersons and talked to them about Stingray, we discussed the voice for X20, and I did the Peter Lorre voice for them. They said, oh, that's it. I said, okay, that's good, yeah, I'll do it like that.
It didn't make sense for us to try to claim that we in England were doing that. Can you imagine a broadcaster saying, there's great excitement in this country at the moment because the first rocket going to the moon is being launched in Scunthorpe tonight? Now, you know, it would have been laughable. So we were able to use American characters in order to make the stories believable, but at the same time, it also suited our book.
And then for the other character, Phones, I used the voice that I had used in that same film. I had been the radio operator from the South called Sparks. So I just did the similar voice when I did Phones, and I would do, all right, Troy, approaching target, 500 yards, 400 yards, 300 yards, 5 torpedoes.
Here we go again. I know. There are people living under the sea, and I've got theories at the bottom of my garden.
In Edinburgh University, they came up with the idea that they gave us a vibrator, which of course caused everybody to smile, but not that kind of vibrator. And it was a vibrator that people who had their larynx removed through cancer would be able to put the vibrator under their chin, and it made a constant buzz. And then, of course, that sound was transmitted to the air inside the mouth, and I was then able to modulate that by mouthing the words. On our way home. On our way home.
You might be asked for any sort of character voice around the world. I mean, you might be playing a gangster.
Come on, bud. We're wasting our time.
You know, somebody like that.
Are you kidding?
Like George Cagney, Jamie Cagney. Yeah. It could be Indians, Russians, villains from all over the world.
The character of Parker, I saw the clay sculpt, and it was such a wonderful head. I thought, God, we've got to have a marvellous voice for this. And 2 or 3 of us used to go down to a pub in Crookham-on-Thames. They had a nice English little restaurant there, and they had a wine waiter called Arthur. And he was a snob who dropped his H's and then put them back in the wrong place. And he was a lovely character, and he had this wonderful patter. So I sent David Graham, who played the voice of Parker, down to have lunch every day of 1 week.
I went with Gerry to this pub in Cookham and heard this old retainer waiter who used to be in the royal household. I mean, it's a legendary story now. I mean, I didn't basically base the character on him, but he was the seed. I took his idiosyncrasies of voice and character and sort of blew it up.
A stethoscope, ma'am, was good enough for my father, and for my father's father, and before him, my father's...
Yes, all right, Parker. It was just a suggestion.
We decided he would be offended. We didn't tell him, and he went to his grave never knowing that the character was based on him.
Lou's investment had paid huge dividends, and Gerry unexpectedly found himself at the head of one of the most successful franchises of the 60s. When Stingray was completed, Gerry had once again to devise a new concept, and found his inspiration through tragedy.
There was a mine in Germany which comprised a central shaft which went down to some incredible depth, and then every so often there was a gallery going this way and that way and this way, along which miners were hewing coal. And it's difficult to believe, but the mine was actually under a lake. And one day the bottom of the lake fell out and the mine was flooded. The thing that did it for me was they've located the miners, they're trapped under there, and the only way you can get them out is to drill a big borehole. But the only machine capable of it is 8 hours away.
A brand new television series is about to be filmed. The completed puppets, perfect down to the smallest detail, are handed to the expert puppeteers who will bring them to life on the screen. As in any film studio, many different skills are needed. A team of nearly 100 technicians, cameramen and artists are kept busy producing a different 60-minute film every week. And now all is ready. The director has a final check and the cameras roll.
And it was made at first as a half an hour. When the film was finished, I took it to show Lou Grade. And then the lights, end title music, lights came up. And he was silent for a moment. And my heart was thumping because I'd spent a fortune on this thing.
5.
And he walked all the way down the theatre to the screen.
4.
Gerry, this is not a television series.
3.
I was absolutely distraught.
2.
Gerry, I'm telling you, this is not a television series.
1.
He then said, Gerry, this is a feature film.
Thunderbirds are go.
Special effects before then took simply ages to produce, and we produced them at a rate which nobody else had done.
Some of the episodes of Thunderbirds, a terrible train crash, an aeroplane called Fire Flash, which crashed, and this actually happened in real life. And when they were at a much later date, and when they were having a rerun of the films, they couldn't show these episodes. And the worst one was a film called Terror in New York City, where a skyscraper collapsed. Having had a whole bunch of American characters, I thought we ought to have at least 2 English characters, and I came up with the idea of Penelope and Parker.
We're closing in on him, milady.
Good, Parker. Wait till we get to a clear stretch of road. We don't want to create a scene.
Very good, milady.
They could play a serious role, but they'd be heavily laced with comedy.
Reverse!
There was no need to shout, Lord Silton. You see, we're going quite smoothly now.
Oh, we are, madam, but backwards.
I knew that we British have the capability of laughing at ourselves, and the Americans love to laugh at us. So it worked very well.
Before the series had even aired, Lou announced to Gerry that he would be backing a feature film.
The film was made with puppets. It was very well made, and I thought it was a great picture, and so did everybody else. I was sitting in the Hilton Hotel where they'd made all the Thunderbird craft in ice, and I was with an executive from the American company that had co-produced it with Lou. And he was swirling his scotch around in a glass and thinking, and he said, you know, Gerry, I can't make up my mind whether this is going to take as much money as Bond or more. But the following day, Sylvia and I went on a tour to promote the film, and it was just a terrible time because our marriage was breaking up, and it was a very difficult time, and it was even more difficult because when the show was over and we left the theatre, the manager, I said, well, good night, sleep well. And he said, you're joking. He said, I'll be up all night. He said, they'll be queuing up 5 o'clock tomorrow morning to see this. Well, they didn't queue up. In fact, the theatres were empty. And the only thing that we could think was at that time, the audience was not used to seeing a feature film version of a television show.
Thunderbirds Are Go was a commercial disaster, and despite extremely healthy overseas sales, Lou failed to secure the network transmission he required to continue funding the most expensive television series in the country.
I went to see Lou, and I thought he was going to say, let's go on with Thunderbirds, but he said, I want a new show. And I appealed, and he said, Gerry, it's easier for me to sell a new show than more Thunderbirds.
This is the voice of the Mysterons. We are peaceful beings, and you have tried to destroy us. It will mean the ultimate destruction of life on Earth.
Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons marked a complete change of direction for Gerry Anderson and his team. Now working under the banner of Century 21, Captain Scarlet heralded the arrival of a new, darker, more realistic style.
Captain Scarlet was a much colder, a much darker series.
Captain Brown? Captain Brown, are you all right?
It was just one of those ideas that we would make him indestructible. But first they had to kill a character, and then they could revive the character as a Mysteron looking like a human being. It was all part of making the show exciting and different.
Advances in technology allowed the puppets to be correctly proportioned.
The puppets were actually changed, that the heads became smaller.
On all the early shows, we had to make the heads bigger than they should be to house the automatic mouth movement.
Got more sophisticated in the latter ones, and the solenoid, instead of being in the head, was built in the chest with a linkage through to the head.
Therefore, we could reduce the head to the correct size for the bodies. Back to my days in the cutting room, along came magnetic recording. You'd hold a strip of film and you can't see anything on it. But in fact, if you run it through a sensing head, it produced dialogue or whatever it was that being recording on it. And I just stared in wonderment because there was a recording on it that I couldn't see, but it was apparently possible to wipe that recording and then record something else on the same piece of film. Well, of course, this was very, very exciting, and that was what led me to think, well, our brains work on electrical impulses, so theoretically it should be possible to record somebody's brain pulses and then transfer them to another person's brain, so enabling Joe 90 to become anything from a fighter pilot to a surgeon or whatever, which enabled for him to spy on behalf of our country. Always good against evil, don't forget.
Over here, Coletti.
Stanley Unwin did the Secret Service, and again it was the problem that we couldn't make the puppets walk, and I came up with the idea of getting Stanley Unwin to do all the walking shots and driving shots in this Model T Ford that he had.
Matthew, I'm afraid I may be slightly delayed. That?
I wish I could copy Stanley. I mean, see, what he did was very, very difficult, very, very clever. He would talk a load of nonsense. You weren't able to understand a word he was saying, except that as he spoke, with his hands, with his gestures, it really looked as if he was saying something sensible, but you couldn't understand a word of it. And so I thought it would be a great idea if I cast him in the role of a secret agent.
Did you realise, sir, that you were exceeding the speed limit?
I'm afraid I didn't, officer.
Well, you will be reported for the question to be considered of prosecuting you for exceeding the speed limit.
Quite so.
And if he ever got into a difficult spot, say the police would stop him, he would talk to them in his unwinese.
Write your scribbly in your bookery. All uttering words, speed of your pen slow must deceive my eyeball.
And of course that would fox the police totally. They had to be polite. They would say, sorry, I didn't quite get that because they're writing it down. Oh, he says, I'll repeat that.
I didn't quite catch that, sir.
Ah, Partlow, I'll explain to you. Now, Matthew, my gardener, is deep joy with green fingers in the garbage, you understand?
I see.
Yes. Well, now, we've got this urgent mission for the bishop, and you understand for the bishop of that?
Right.
You do?
But as I showed Lou all the films I made as soon as they were finished. And as soon as Stanley Unwin went into his gobbledygook,
Engie bold.
Lou jumped up, shouted to the projectionist, cut, 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 stop, stop, put the lights up.
Right.
Now, this is a caution of vibrail in his eardrums, it might crash you for lollipop.
And he said, cancel the show, Gerry. Just finish off the first 13. And I said, why? He said, well, people will never understand him in America. And I said, but Lou, so they'll find they're not supposed to understand. Never. And that was the end of that one.
Supermarionation had become a trademark of the 60s. Each series has enjoyed a long shelf life via repeats and home video, and the puppets have become a cultural phenomenon.
He said, it's a puppet series we're doing, Julian. He said, it may run for 6 months, if we're lucky.
There was nothing at the front door and a finished product that was reconstructed inside came out the other end.
Making things that I've always wanted to make, playing with puppets, and at the end of the week they pay you money as well.
They were real pioneering days, and they were a lot of fun, in fact.
The 1960s had seen the rise of an empire. Comics, toys, records, books, and most importantly, a string of successful action-adventure shows with a difference. Every year, new adventures emerged from the unconventional location of a warehouse on the Slough trading estate. AP Films, and as they were later known, Century 21 Productions, worked constantly at refining their films in order to produce the slickest children's shows ever made. But soon, it was time for the puppet stars to move over and make way for a more conventional type of star. For Gerry Anderson, the man at the head of this empire, the switch to live actors was a dream come true. Or was it?
Their mouth is in sync with their words, and they can walk, and they can pick up things. Boy, this has got to be absolutely fabulous, you know. That was my first impression. UFO obviously is unidentified flying objects, and it dealt with aliens who were landing on Earth. Dr. Bernard had carried out the first heart transplant, so I quickly thought, well, that's what they're coming to Earth for, to steal organs. There was an organisation called Shadow, which was set up, where they had a base on the moon with interceptor spacecraft that could intercept the incoming UFOs long before they reached Earth. And they had a base on Earth that controlled the whole operation. I set that base under a film studio.
I'll keep you a moment, Alec. Trouble? Oh, why else would I send for you? Take a look at this. That's Westbrook Electronics, isn't it? Yeah. What's left of it. Well, what happened? For 10 years, there have been setbacks. We've had accidents, miscalculations, errors of judgment, and other mishaps. Let's put Westbrook Electronics down to other mishaps.
You mean a UFO?
Well, there's no proof.
So bang goes the
show. Did very well in America. It went into syndication. The most two important markets in America are New York and Los Angeles, and it led both those territories for 17 consecutive weeks. Because UFO was doing so well in America, I had a call from Lou to say, quick, roll on and make a new series. So I said, well, if we're going to make a second season, we've got to make some improvements. Yeah, fine, whatever you think, Gerry. So I started to make the show at another studio. And as we were developing it, one of the guys in America, I wasn't particularly fond of him, I have to say, phoned Lou and said, listen, the ratings are dropping on UFO. We made 26 shows. They ran for 17 weeks, leading the country, but because they dipped, cancel the second season.
It was not the first time that Gerry had experienced interference from American executives.
Right at the very beginning of working with Lou, I made an episode, I think it was Supercar in actual fact, where Supercar landed in a jungle and they were surrounded by black people.
I suggest we commence our search with the utmost dispatch.
Lou had an American advisor, unfortunately, and the American advisor said, Gerry, I want to run that show with you. It's okay. I want some alterations made. Oh yeah, what? So he ran the show and he said, I want every coloured person taken out. I said, but what's wrong with it? You know, they're landing in a jungle. It's like a tribe. I want every coloured person taken out because on the Bible Belt, they will never accept that. And Deep South, no, you either take them out or we cancel the series. So I had to take them out. Spent a lot of money and effort building a new sky base, which is much bigger than the one that we had in the first season. And we've made new uniforms and so forth and so on. I said, you decided to not proceed with the second series. What if I take all the material I've got and I turn it into a new show? He said, great idea, do it. Well, I got a call from this guy in America who shall remain nameless, but he was a thorn in my flesh. He was able to get round Lou because he was able to say, Lou, the Americans won't understand that, and Lou, the Americans like this. He called me and he said, Gerry, I understand Lou has given you permission to turn this into a new show. I said, that's right. He said, okay, you want my backing? So I said, well, obviously. He said, OK, well, here's the deal. I don't want, in this new series, for you to have one single show that takes place on Earth. So I said, well, why? There was an episode where Straker's kid was killed. It was a wonderful episode. Everybody loved it. I'm telling you, it's not the kind of thing that an American audience want to see. And he said, let me make it simple for you. Unless you do as I say, I'm going to pick up the phone and say to Lou, my recommendation is that you shouldn't go with this. So I said, okay, let me call you back. Anyway, I went to bed that night and thinking. So I came up the next morning, and I got up next morning and I phoned this guy and I said, look, I've got an idea how to save you. I said, I will shoot every episode on the moon base. Okay, they'll all be on the moon, they'll stay on the moon right the way through. He said, that's not good enough. That won't prevent you. I know you, Gerry, that won't prevent you making a show on Earth. Okay, let me call you back. And I suddenly thought, I know what I'll do. So I phoned him and I said, what if I blow the moon out of orbit with everybody on board? He said, okay, you got your show. We negotiated with Martin Landau and Barbara Bain. At first we met with them, showed them a feature film I had made, and they were very keen to do the series. Then their agent stepped in and said, okay guys, if you want these two, you do not talk to them again until you've signed a contract. Lou had said to us, look, I've gone along with you all this time, but not a penny more. So we were sunk. They were sitting by the pool, and Abe Mandel said to me, Gerry, it's 5 o'clock here, so it's what time, 11 o'clock in London. And Lou always goes to bed at 9. We daren't ring him. But how can we let the series go down? And then suddenly he stood up and said, to hell with it. I'm going to ring Lou. And then I heard it. I thought, God, he's a great guy. And then I heard Lou's voice. Hello? He said, Lou, I've got Gerry for you. And he put the receiver in my hand. I thought it was just about the dirtiest trick I've ever known. But good old Lou, he didn't get annoyed with me. And I was able to say, this is positively the last thing. If you let us do this, we've got them. And he said, okay, fine. Martin Landau presents himself with a Californian tan, which makes him look handsome and tough. And Barbara Bain presents herself as being all pale and interesting. So they stand them together for a two-shot, and you've got one with this dark tan and the other one's white as a sheet. And of course, the film contrast cannot cope with that. And the graders used to ring up and say, we can't do this, So we had a wonderful lighting cameraman, but every time there's a two-shot, he dreaded it.
I know that people want me to say bad things about Barbara, but I won't, because we had a very civilized working relationship. I know that there was, I was told that there were certain things that she had in her contract to do with my character, to do with Catherine Schell, that I was never allowed to appear as Catherine Schell, and there was one particular script where that did happen, or it should have happened. I was given a script to read, and Maya turns into Catherine Schell to tease Tony Anhalt, and it was taken out. Next time that I read the script, oops, that scene is gone. And there were other things that I noticed as well, which I'm sure was possibly part of Barbara's contract. The ending of every episode, there is a freeze frame and a close-up of whoever it is on. So it was on Nick, it was on Zena, it was on Barbara, it was on Tony, it was on Martin, it was never on me.
The end of the first series was a major landmark in Gerry's life. After nearly 20 years, his relationship with Sylvia came to an end. It was the conclusion to a successful working partnership, a not entirely successful marriage, and the beginning of an acrimonious divorce that would span 5 years.
Terrahawks, stay on this channel. Terrahawks, stay on this channel.
I was asked by Abe Mandel in New York if we could use an American writer. Long story, but eventually I said okay. And I met Fred Freiberger, who died recently, unfortunately, who was a writer on the very first Star Trek.
There was one funny story to do with Fred Freiberger, that he had a nickname. He was called the serial killer because he had actually done that to other series.
And he was a very, very nice guy, but he was American. And what I mean by that is we have a different way of thinking. You know, we're separated by a common language, as they say.
It was going out more towards, you know, the adolescent age group, that he felt, well, you know, adolescents love monsters, and so we're going to stick to monsters on the whole.
He came up with ideas that I didn't really approve of, and I didn't like. But he was here, quote unquote, to satisfy the American audience, to make it highly saleable in America. And shortly after he arrived, I mean, I got on very well with him, and he was a very nice guy. But I said to him that if you're going to try and turn this show into something else in terms of scripting, then I'm going to appoint you as the producer, because it's only fair. If you turn the show round, or at least that's what you think you're going to do, and make it a huge success in America, then you should be the producer. And if you make a balls of it, you will also be the producer.
True to his reputation as the man with a CV where every entry began, the last series of, Fred Freiberger oversaw the second and last series of Space 1999. Space 1999 was the last sunset for the team which had started work together as a small cottage industry in Slough. The last members of the team who had worked with Gerry for so long finally disbanded. Gerry's working relationship with ATV came to an end after 17 years.
When Space 1999 finished, the Third World War was breaking out at ATV, and there were people at work undermining Lou. And Lou became, understandably, preoccupied with defending his position. And so Lou didn't give me any shows at that time.
For the first time ever, Gerry's career hit a hiatus. But in 1982, after 5 years, Gerry and the puppets returned.
Terrahawks, stay on this channel.
Again, I was trying all the time, trying to make the shows as much like live action as possible, and I decided we should use hand puppets made of rubber. So the puppeteers would put their hand inside the puppet, and so by moving different fingers they could smile and open the mouth and make funny faces and all the rest of it. And the puppeteers had to be put into a pit on the floor so that when they held their puppet up, they were the right height for the camera, which was outside the pit.
We would actually choose sort of cast human types for the talk about actors and actresses that would play the parts if you were using humans, and then basically sculpt heads to start with that represented that type of character, and then to see if we could develop from there a character for the puppet and whether visually it would fit. They had glass fiber bodies, they had glass fiber skulls which had rubber skins, and they had remote controlled eyes, and the mouth functions were done by literally like a ventriloquist dummy. The arms were rod operated, so they were really waist up puppets. We did have full bodies with legs, so we could sometimes set them up in shot and put legs in. If they were sat down, you could literally have a hand through a seat so you could see them sat in a seat.
We have a very bright child here.
Thank you, Granny Zelda.
What's wrong with the back of its head?
What's wrong with the front of yours, you slobber schnitzel?
It's like that because we brought him out too soon.
We had to, or else he would have been late for his birthday.
Is he for real, my grandmother?
I'm afraid so.
He knew I could do Zelda because I told him about how I got into RADA playing Grandma Buggins. And Grandma Buggins was like that. I had a whistle, and I could still do it. And I said, I love doing old ladies. And he said, can you do another old lady? So I said, yes, I can do a toothless old lady. She was a very old lady who used to take in washing. She had no teeth at all, and she's real. She came from Dorset. And she used to say, she had a sister too, who was very much like that. She went to a different school, and they both lived in Dorset. And it was lovely, and I was interviewed when I was 16 doing these. For some, I think it was In Town Tonight with Cary Grant. This old lady was very delighted to meet Cary Grant, she was. And anyway, that's how he'd heard about that. Ruined my vocal cords, though. I could never sing again. And that's true. I had a high soprano voice, and after Zelda going, I couldn't sing again. If I do now, it's like a sort of bass.
Did you think about Claims Are Us?
Silence! How dare you speak to me like that? You, a mere human being.
Human? But aren't you?
No, I am not. My people were once the slaves of humans on our planet. We were their robots. But soon our intellect was greater than that of our creators. So we destroyed them.
Your android.
When I first went down to Bray Studios, he showed me a photograph of the puppet of Neinstein, who at the time had no hair. And he said, and the puppet looked like Humphrey Bogart. And I said, I was kind of thinking about Humphrey Bogart. Let's try it. So I was going, okay, I do Bogart, it's not a problem. Terrahawks, stay on this channel. This is an emergency. Yeah. Themes are simple. I never did meet one who didn't understand a slap in the mouth or a slug from a 45. And he said, we all make mistakes, kid. That's why there's rubbers on the end of pencils. What a great line.
That's a great line.
He said, it doesn't work. And then he said, so this is him in terms, being the way he was. He said, well, who's your favourite impression? And at the time it was Jack Nicholson. He said, well, do me Jack Nicholson. So hi there, this is Jack Nicholson here. We're all kind of a little crazy here. And he said, like that, but not.
Impersonation.
He said, it's just not. It's not dynamic. It's not leader. So keep the Jack, make him a leader, and that's how, Terrahawks stay on this channel. It's Jack Nicholson, but it's not as like Terrahawks.
For space sake, Zero, not now. Attention!
Right, man. That's the avenue. This is it.
I think the Zeroids were great creations. No one had ever had a ball as a sort of robot before. And Windsor Davis, obviously, taking the biscuit as Sergeant Major Zero. Only he could have done it. There is nobody else. And it was what I found very interesting about Windsor, where we're all multitasking as far as characters are concerned. But Windsor, bless him, could only talk like that. Could not talk like anything else.
I wouldn't either.
No, I think he was born in the army. And apart from once, we had one episode when one of I think it was a Zeroid, was wounded, and we needed a doctor. And Windsor, I think the only other character he played in the programme, he said, "I will be the doctor." And Gerry said, "Okay, well, how do you think the doctor's going to be, Windsor?" And he went, "I think it's going to be like this."
101. 101. Open fire. What have I done?
They have opened fire.
Yes, Zelda. This has got to be the end.
It's not one of my favourites by a long chalk, but it paid the rent and kept most of the team together, so it served its purpose.
No, Bobby. I'm asking you what your favourite character is.
Oh, sorry. I like that one with the bulging white eyes, the gaping red mouth and the green skin. Now, what's his name?
One of Zelda's creations?
No, funny chap, looks like a toad.
Sounds like someone I used to know.
When Terrahawks came to an end after 39 episodes, Gerry's next venture was much lower key. Dick Spanner followed the bizarre adventures of a wisecracking private investigator who was on the case in The Big Pair.
It was midnight. The streets were empty. It had been raining cats and dogs.
Janet Street Porter had a show, a Sunday show, coming up, and she approached me and said, "Is it possible for you to make a humorous 5 or 6 minute, that we can slot into the show?" And so we made 22 episodes of a New York private investigator whose name was Dick Spanner.
My name's Spanner. Dick Spanner. She wanted me to find her man. I asked her man who? She said his name was Harry. Seems he worked in a circus. Human cannonball. Then he'd been fired. I took the case. I was back out on the street. I wondered what the hell she had in this thing.
Terrahawks, stay on this channel. Terrahawks, stay on this channel.
Gerry's career continued on and off through the 90s with shows such as Space Precinct and Lavender Castle. However, Gerry made his big comeback in 2005 with new Captain Scarlet.
It was very difficult to set up, and we had a rough ride to begin with because it was a very, very complicated thing to attempt, but it smoothed out, and we made what I, without any shame, say is the biggest technical achievement of my career, and I think it is probably the best CGI series that has certainly been made in this country and probably the world.
Scarlet.
I'm closing on you. Be there in less than a minute.
SIG.
Adam, look out!
They took the show and they destroyed it. I mean, I won't mince my word, they destroyed it. They cut the front and the end of each episode. They cut the episode in half. They laced it into a terrible show called The Ministry of Mayhem. 3 hours of absolute rubbish for kids, including bun fights and food fights. The show was not listed in any of the magazines. It was not promoted. And when the show went out on The Ministry of Mayhem, nobody said that Captain Scarlet was going to be on. They didn't say when it was going to be on, and it was on a different time every week. And when the first half finished and faded out, nobody was told when the second half would begin, or indeed if there was going to be a second half.
Is that guy nuts?
No. Indestructible.
When Captain Scarlet was finished, I had to look for money for new shows. And when you go to big financiers and say, I'm Gerry Anderson, "Oh, come in, Mr. Anderson, do sit down. I want finance for a film." "Oh, absolutely, yes, no, what is it?" It all goes beautifully. And then the dreaded question comes up. You made the last Captain Scarlet?" "Yes, yes." "Oh, yes, I saw it." "They'll say, very, very good. How's it doing?" Ba-bum. What am I supposed to say? It has been murdered. Now, what people to think, oh, he's making excuses. So it's been very, very difficult to put my career back very seriously. When I look at my career from afar, even I'm amazed at how many shows I've made. No less than 18 series, 800 episodes. And so it's been a wonderful career, and one that I'm now very proud of. What I find so difficult to understand is that, for example, ITV own all of my shows, including Thunderbirds. Now, my greatest ambition has been for a long time to remake Thunderbirds. And I would have thought that now that Michael Grade has taken over, because of course he's one of the Grades, and he's, just like all the other Grades, a very nice person, but I would have thought that it would have made a wonderful announcement for Michael Grade to say, and today I have given Gerry Anderson a commission to remake Thunderbirds. I mean, after all, the feature film on Thunderbirds was an absolute disaster. It was, I mean, an unmitigated disaster. In most cinemas it was taken off after 3 days, and the very few that lasted a week. The interesting thing was that Universal Pictures America offered me $750,000 to go to the premiere and say how wonderful the film was. Well, I turned that down. See, because I've still got some self-respect. And when I look at the industry generally, I mean, I've been talking about Lou Grade, a man who would decide somebody had the magic touch. Today, to approach any television company, you know, you have to make an appointment to see the one of the editors there, commissioning editors, and probably you have to wait 3 or 4 weeks to get an interview. And then if you go up, you know, a person like me, I can put my ideas onto film. Fast-cutting music, great drama, and the rest of it. But when it comes to presenting myself, that's not my style. And it's very wrong, in my view, for people like myself to be judged in this way. We have a great industry, at least we had a great industry. I'm looking forward to Michael Grade settling in at ITV. I know that he's going to call me one day and say, "Okay, Gerry, I've got everything under control now. I came into this company, there are 56,000 people employed, but now I've been able to devote a bit of time. Come and see me, I want to talk about Thunderbirds or UFO or whatever." And I'm looking forward to that day like I can't tell you.
Whatever the future holds for Gerry, there can be no denying that he has been at the helm of some of the most iconic programming this country has ever seen, and his shows continue to live on and remain as successful as ever.
I'll be back.